The air was cold that morning, the kind of chill that seeps into bones and lingers long after the sun climbs higher. The guard at the gate shifted from foot to foot, his breath forming small clouds in the air. The line of vehicles stretched back. Along the narrow road, their engines humming low, a rhythm of impatience and routine. The old man moved slow toward the checkpoint, his shoulders squared beneath a faded brown jacket that looked too thin for the weather. His boots worn but clean. Walked as if each step had purpose, like a man used to following orders even when no one gave them any more. The guard noticed him from a distance and narrowed his eyes. Something about the old man's stride seemed too steady, too sure for someone his age. When the veteran reached the small booth, he stopped a few feet short and waited. His eyes calm and unreadable, the guard glanced at him, then down at the clipboard in his hand. His orders were clear. No exceptions, no sentimental stories today. Security had been tight since the recent incidents, and he wasn't about to be the one who made a mistake. He asked the old man for his ID, his tone brisk, professional, almost cold. The old man nodded without a word and reached into his jacket. His hand trembled, slightly, not from fear but from the weight of years, from the quiet ache of time. He pulled out a small card, its edges worn, its colors faded. The guard took it, glanced down and frowned. The photograph was almost unrecognizable. A younger man in uniform. Staring back from decades ago, the name barely legible, the card itself old enough to belong in a museum. The guard looked up and shook his head. The ID was outdated by at least 20 years, maybe more. He explained that it wasn't valid anymore, that new access rules required updated credentials. The veteran said nothing for a long moment, his gaze drifting toward the flag fluttering near the gate. His eyes followed its movement like he was seeing something else. Maybe the memory of another flag. On another field, maybe the faces of men who had stood under it with him. The guard felt a flicker of discomfort under that silent stare, but he forced it down. Rules were rules, and his orders were not to bend them for anyone. No matter the story, he cleared his throat, told the old man to step aside so others could pass. The veteran didn't move his voice when it finally came, was quiet and steady. He said he just needed to go inside for a few minutes, that someone was expecting him. The guard asked. Who but the old man only said you wouldn't know him? And that was all the guard needed to hear to grow impatient? He gestured for the next car to pull forward and told the veteran to wait off to the side. The man obeyed without complaint. But there was something in the way he stood, something that made a few drivers glance his way and whisper. Among themselves, his posture was too straight, too disciplined, his expression too calm, as if standing outside in the cold was part of some unspoken mission. The guard noticed this too, but ignored it. He had seen his share of stubborn old soldiers before, men who couldn't let go of the past, who wore their medals to the grocery store and told stories. No one asked to hear. He told himself this was no different. Minutes dragged by, the line moved slowly, the hum of engines filling the air. The old man stood perfectly still, watching every car that passed through the gate, his eyes taking in the guard's movements, the timing, the rhythm of each exchange. The guard felt uneasy without knowing why. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the veteran seemed to be waiting for something that wasn't about entry or permission, but about recognition, about being seen by someone who had forgotten what he once stood for, finally. The guard stepped away from the booth and approached him again. Maybe to end it. Maybe to find out what the old man really wanted. He asked for the ID again, even though he already knew what it looked like. The veteran handed it over once more. The guard studied it, trying to read the faint lines of text, trying to find a reason to send him away for good. The longer he looked, the more he felt the strange weight of the moment pressing down like the air itself had, thickened around them. The old man spoke then quietly, telling him that he had been stationed here once, long ago, before the buildings were new, before the rules had changed, before the world had forgotten men like him. The guard listened half out of courtesy, half out of curiosity. He asked when that was. The old man gave a year that made the guard blink. That was before he was even born, before the guard had ever thought about duty or country or service. The veteran smiled faintly at the reaction. Not a proud smile, not one of superiority, but one of sadness, like he had expected not to be believed. The guard felt something shift inside him, a faint recognition that he tried to shake off. He said that still didn't change the fact that the ID was invalid, that without clearance he couldn't let him pass. The old man nodded again, almost as if he agreed, but his eyes held steady on the guard's face as if he were searching for something buried deep. The guard turned away to end the conversation. But the old man spoke again this time, his voice low and firm. He said a name, one that made the guard stop mid-step. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "How do you know that name?" he asked. The veteran didn't answer right away. He just looked at him. Then, at the patch on his shoulder, then back again, the guard realized his pulse had quickened because the name the old man spoke was his own. His full name spoken the way only someone from the military might say it. Crisp, precise, without hesitation. He asked again, "How do you know my name?" But the old man just smiled that faint, sad smile and said, "You trained under my command once long ago." The guard froze. He searched the old man's face again, trying to see through the years through the gray hair, and lined skin, trying to match it with memories that seemed to stir just beyond reach. The sounds of the bass faded, the cars, the wind, the voices. Everything seemed to go quiet. The guard felt his throat tighten. The veteran took a small step forward, not threatening, just steady, like he was stepping back into a place he had always belonged. He said, "You don't remember me, but I remember you, every face, every name." The guard opened his mouth, but no words came. He looked again at the ID, at the faded photo, and suddenly saw it. The younger face in the picture matched the memory. The story he had heard from training about the commanding officer who never made it back from the final mission, who had been listed missing, presumed gone. The guard felt the air shift again, the weight of realization pressing down on him. But before he could speak, another voice called from the booth, asking if everything was all right. The guard turned half-dazed and said it was fine. But when he looked back, the old man had already turned away, standing once more in the same spot, eyes on the flag as it flapped in the cold wind. There was something in that stillness, something that made the guard feel small and unsteady. He wanted to ask more to understand. But the veteran only said softly, "I came to see the names on the wall, then he'll be gone." The guard let him pass without another word, his throat tight, his heart pounding as the old man walked through the gate, slow and steady, disappearing into the mist that hung low over the base road, and though he followed with his eyes until the figure was gone, the guard knew something inside him had shifted forever. The guard stood frozen long after the old man disappeared into the haze, his mind replaying. The words, the tone, the weight behind them. He could still hear the low, calm voice saying, "You trained under my command." And though the memory felt impossible, something deep inside him whispered that it was true. He turned slowly toward the booth, but his thoughts had already drifted beyond his post. Beyond his duties, the base around him felt unfamiliar, as if the walls and fences belonged to another lifetime. He could not shake the feeling that something significant had just happened, something that would not let him rest until he understood it. Inside the base, the old veteran walked with the same quiet determination that had carried him through war and loss. His boots echoed softly against the pavement, each step a reminder of years long. Past, the buildings had changed. New walls stood where open fields had once stretched, but the air still held the same faint scent of oil and dust, the rhythm of engines, the distant shouts of orders. He paused near a stone wall that bore hundreds of names etched deep into its surface. He traced one with his fingertip, the letters cold against his skin, each name a memory, each line a story that someone somewhere had chosen not to forget. He could almost hear their voices again, the laughter. In the barracks, the shouts during training, the cries that came in the night when no one was supposed to hear them. The faces flickered in his mind, one after another, like ghosts dancing on the edge of sight. He whispered something under his breath, a wordless promise, perhaps, or a quiet farewell, then straightened his shoulders as if answering a roll call that no one else could hear. Back at the gate, the young guard could no longer focus on the cars moving past him, his routine broken by a single encounter that now felt like a fracture. In time, he tried to reason with himself that the old man had simply known his name from the badge on his uniform, that it was coincidence or chance. But the way the veteran had spoken, the precision, the tone of command, the familiarity in his eyes, none of it could be dismissed. He knew that voice from somewhere deep in his memory, though he could not place when or how. When his shift ended, he walked through the base with heavy steps, unable to resist the pull toward the direction where the old man had gone. He followed the main path, then veered toward the memorial grounds, a place he rarely visited. He found the veteran standing still before the wall, his back straight, his head slightly bowed as if he were listening to the silent chorus of names carved before him. The guard approached slowly, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. The old man did not turn, but he spoke first. His voice, carrying easily through the still air, "You came." He said not as a question, but as a statement of fact. The guard stopped beside him, unsure what to say. The old man continued, "You do not remember me, but I remember you and the others. You were one of the last groups I trained before the mission that took us all away." The guard frowned, confusion mixing with curiosity. What mission, he asked. But the old man only smiled faintly and said the one they never wrote about, because not all of us returned. Guard felt a chill despite the sunlight. He glanced at the names on the wall and saw one that made his breath catch, the same last name as his own. His grandfather had spoken of a commanding officer from that same unit, long ago, a man who had vanished. During a storm in the desert, the story had been a fragment of family lore. Something told at gatherings when talk turned to honor and sacrifice. The old man before him fit the story too perfectly. Yet he looked no older than his grandfather would have been if he had lived. The years did not match, the timelines did not fit. But the truth hovered between them, too heavy to ignore. The veteran finally turned to face him, his eyes steady, the same calm that had unsettled the guard before. He said, "I told you that you trained under my command, and in a way you still do. Because every soldier who stands at that gate carries the weight of those who came before. We are never truly gone, not while someone remembers." The guard felt something twist inside his chest, an ache that was not fear but something deeper, something like reverence. He asked quietly, "Who are you really?" The old man looked back at the wall, then at the flag above them, fluttering gently in the wind. "I was a soldier once," he said, "and that is all that matters now. The world changed. The uniforms changed, the names on the gates changed, but duty never did. I came today not to enter, but to see if anyone still remembered why we stood watch in the first place. And when I saw you, I knew the answer." The guard wanted to speak, to tell him that he did remember, that he understood now, but the words felt too small, too fragile. The old man reached into his jacket and pulled out the same worn ID, handing it over once more. The guard hesitated but took it. The card felt warm in his hand, though the air around them was cold. He looked down and saw that the photo had somehow sharpened the face clearer than before. The edges no longer frayed, the colors richer. He looked up, quickly. But the old man had stepped back, eyes on the horizon. "Keep it," the veteran said. "It belongs here more than I do now." The guard shook his head, wanting to protest, but the words would not come. The old man smiled again, that quiet, knowing smile. That seemed to hold both sorrow and peace, he said. When someone asks who you let through the gate today, tell them it was someone who had already earned the right to be there, and before the guard could answer, he turned and began to walk away slow, deliberate, each step fading into the distance. The guard stood frozen watching him until he vanished around the corner. Then he looked again at the ID still in his hand and saw something that made his heart stop. Beneath the printed name was a date of death marked decades earlier. He stared at it in disbelief, the ink dark and clear as if freshly written. He felt the wind rise around him, carrying the faint echo of a voice calling commands in the distance. He turned but saw no one, only the flutter of the flag and the long, empty road. Night fell before he left the wall. He stayed there long after his shift had ended, unable to shake the strange calm that had settled over him. He traced the names again, searching for the one that matched the card. When he found it, his breath caught the same name, the same rank, the same face in the photo beside it. He placed the ID carefully beneath the engraving and whispered, "Thank you," then stepped back. The air around him felt lighter somehow, as if a burden had lifted. In the days that followed, the guard found himself different. He stood taller, spoke softer, listened more. He greeted each veteran who came to the gate with a respect he had not fully understood before his fellow guards noticed the change. But he offered no explanation. One morning he returned to the wall hoping to see the card again, but it was gone. In its place lay a small silver insignia, tarnished but unmistakably old. He picked it up, held it against his palm, and felt that same warmth again. Sometimes when the wind was right, he thought he heard that voice again, calling orders in the distance. Steady calm, carrying the weight of command. He would glance toward the road, expecting to see the old man walking through the mist. But there was only sunlight and silence still. He knew deep down that the encounter had not been a dream, that some things defy explanation, because they belong to the quiet space between memory and duty, between the living and the remembered. The base carried on life as usual, soldiers moving with purpose, trucks rumbling through the gates. The guard remained at his post watching over it all, but his eyes now carried a depth that spoke of something unseen. When a new recruit once asked him why he sometimes stared at the flag for so long, he simply said, "I am listening." The recruit laughed, but later when he stood alone at the gate, he too felt the strange stillness, the echo of footsteps that were not his own. Years later, the guard became the one training others, teaching them not just the rules but the reasons behind them. He told them stories not found in manuals about honor, about silence, about the weight of a name carved in stone. And sometimes when he walked past the wall, he would pause at that one place where the old man's name was etched, his hand brushing lightly over it. And though no one else could hear it, he always whispered the same words that had changed everything you trained under my command. And in that moment, the circle was complete. The living and the lost bound by duty, by memory, by a phrase that would never fade as long as someone remembered to speak it. The guard no longer wondered whether the old man had been real, because in a way he still was in every salute, in every watch kept in every gate that opened, not for a card or a clearance, but for the silent understanding between those who serve and those who came before them, and somewhere beyond the mist, beyond the reach of orders and ranks. The old veteran watched quietly, a faint smile on his lips, knowing that the lesson had been passed on, and that was all he had come for.